"You're a burden, and so is your baby," my parents said to me, their words cutting through the silence like a blade. I stood frozen in place, my heart pounding in my chest as the reality of their words sank in. How could they say something so cruel, so heartless, about their own grandchild? My baby, my flesh and blood. I had spent years caring for them, paying their bills when they struggled, making sure they never wanted for anything, and this was how they repaid me. The table was set for dinner, but the warm meal in front of me seemed to have lost its taste. It wasn't just the food that felt off, it was the air between us. The tension was thick, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I had always thought that family was supposed to be a place of love and support, but at that moment, it felt more like a prison. I could hear the clink of silverware as they ate, not a care in the world, while I tried to process what had just been said. My mother's eyes were cold, her face set in an expression I didn't recognize. My father, usually the one to speak up in our family, sat in silence, his eyes avoiding mine. The words echoed in my mind, replaying over and over again. "You're a burden, and so is your baby." It felt like a slap to the face, a betrayal, and yet, I kept my composure. I smiled tightly, though I could feel the sting of tears threatening to spill. "I'm not a burden," I replied quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside me. They didn't know the full story. They didn't know how I had been paying their bills for months, covering their mortgage, the utility bills, and even their medical expenses. They didn't know that while they were out enjoying their retirement, I was quietly handling their financial burdens. The idea of telling them the truth, of letting them know what I had been doing, filled me with dread. It felt like it would make their words even worse, as if I was somehow trying to earn their love by sacrificing everything for them. But I knew deep down, they would never understand. As I sat there, the words of my parents still echoing in my mind, I realized something crucial. They had no idea. They had no idea what it was like to struggle silently, to put aside your own needs for the sake of someone else. They had no idea what it took to pay their bills while I was barely getting by, managing to keep my head above water for the sake of family. They hadn't seen the sleepless nights when I worried about whether I could make ends meet, or the days I skipped meals just to make sure they were taken care of. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here they were, calling me a burden, when I had been the one carrying their weight for so long. But I wasn't going to let them see how much it hurt. No, I wasn't going to cry in front of them. Instead, I sat there, holding my baby close, keeping the truth buried deep inside. The next time they saw me, they'd know I wasn't the one who was burdened. I didn't say anything after that night. I just sat there, my baby sleeping in my arms, while the harsh words of my parents lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. The silence was unbearable. I hadn't expected them to treat me like this, not after everything I had done for them. I had spent years supporting them, paying for their medical bills, covering their rent, and making sure they had everything they needed. Yet here I was, sitting at their table, being called a burden. The days passed by slowly, each one feeling heavier than the last. I kept thinking about what had happened. I had always believed that family was supposed to be a support system, a place where you could find love and understanding. But now, it seemed like I had been nothing more than a source of convenience for them. They took, and they never gave. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How could they not see the sacrifices I had made? How could they think that my baby, my child, was a burden? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered. The next day, I visited my parents again. This time, I came prepared. I had gathered every document, every receipt that proved how much I had been paying for them. The bills, the rent payments, the medical expenses, everything. When I walked into their house, they didn't greet me with the warmth I had hoped for. They didn't even look up from their chairs when I entered. It was as if I wasn't even there. I stood in the doorway for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. This was it. This was the moment when everything would change. I set the papers down on the coffee table in front of them. They glanced at the stack, then at each other, their expressions unreadable. I could feel the tension rise as I spoke. "You call my baby a burden. But do you know what a burden really is? A burden is relying on someone else without ever offering anything in return. A burden is taking without giving. I've been paying your bills for months, and you never even knew. I've been carrying this weight for both of us, and you have the nerve to call my child a burden?" My voice was steady, but inside, I felt a storm brewing. They remained silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. My mother finally spoke, her voice quiet. We didn't know. We didn't realize. Of course you didn't, I replied. Because you never bothered to ask. You never bothered to care. You've been so caught up in your own lives that you didn't see what was happening right under your nose. The words hit harder than I intended, but I couldn't stop. I had kept quiet for too long. I had carried this burden for too long. It was time for them to know the truth. I've done all of this for you. I continued, my voice gaining strength. But you never saw me. You never saw what I was sacrificing. You never saw the late nights when I was up worrying about how I was going to make ends meet. You never saw the times I had to skip meals to make sure you had everything you needed. And now you have the audacity to call my child a burden. I could feel the anger building inside me, but I also felt something else. A sense of relief. I was finally standing up for myself. Finally, they were seeing me for who I really was, not just as someone they could rely on without question. My father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. We didn't mean to hurt you. No, I said, my tone cold. You didn't mean to hurt me. But you did. And that's what matters. The room fell silent again, the weight of my words hanging heavy. I didn't wait for them to say anything more. I turned on my heel and walked out of their house, my head held high. As I stepped out into the bright sunshine, I realized something. I wasn't the burden here. I had been carrying the weight for far too long, but now, it was their turn to see what it felt like. I left my parents' house that day, feeling the weight of everything I had just said. But as I stepped outside, the sun felt warmer than it had in weeks. It was like a burden had been lifted off my shoulders, one I had been carrying for so long, but had never realized how heavy it truly was. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. My phone didn't ring. No one reached out to apologize, not even a simple text. I wondered if they had actually listened to me, or if they were just pretending it never happened. I thought about calling them, but I didn't. I had said what I needed to say. I had finally found my voice, and now it was time to wait. Days turned into weeks, and I focused on my life with Emily. Every day was filled with her laughter, her smiles, the little moments that made life worth living. It was all I needed. My parents, on the other hand, seemed to fade into the background, their absence less of a loss and more of a relief. It was then that I realized how toxic our relationship had become. I had spent my entire life trying to please them, trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect mother, the perfect everything. But I had never stopped to think about what I needed, what I wanted. I had sacrificed so much, and for what? A family who saw me as nothing more than a tool to be used when they needed help? A baby who was nothing but a burden in their eyes. It wasn't right, and I wasn't going to let it continue. I started taking control of my life in ways I hadn't before. I began looking into things that I had put off for too long, my own dreams, my own goals. There was so much I had missed, so many opportunities one had ignored just to keep the peace. I started writing again, something I had done as a teenager but had stopped when life got busy. I also started planning trips with Emily, things we could enjoy together, just the two of us. We went to the park, we spent weekends at the beach, and I even took her on a little road trip up the coast. It was freeing, knowing that I didn't have to rely on anyone for happiness. One day, as I was packing for another trip, my phone rang. It was my mother. I hesitated before answering. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Hi, sweetheart, she said, her voice softer than I had heard it in weeks. I've been thinking about what you said, and I'm sorry. I paused. Sorry for what? For everything, she continued. For the way we treated you. For taking you for granted. I don't know what got into us, but I've had time to think, and I realize now how wrong we were. I could feel the air in my chest tighten. For a moment, I wanted to say something, to demand answers, to tell her how much her words had hurt. But instead, I took a deep breath and said, I appreciate the apology, but it's going to take time. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, she said, I understand. We'll be here when you're ready. I hung up the phone and sat down, letting the weight of the conversation settle in. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control over my life. The truth was out, and now it was up to them to prove that they could change. I wasn't going to wait forever. I wasn't going to keep making excuses for them. I had Emily, and that was enough. I spent the next few weeks in a strange state of calm, almost as if I was watching my life from a distance. I took things day by day, focusing on Emily, on my work, on small joys. But something inside me had changed, something that I wasn't sure I could reverse. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need them to validate my worth. But still, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. The silence between my parents and me had stretched on longer than I ever expected. I still didn't hear from them, and it was hard not to notice the growing distance. There was no apology, no attempt to make amends. I had made my peace with it, but a small part of me couldn't help but wonder if they even truly cared. A week passed, then two. I kept moving forward with my life. Emily had become my focus. She was my joy, my reason to keep going. As the weeks passed, I grew more certain that this was the path I needed to walk alone. I had spent too many years catering to my parents' needs, pushing my own desires and feelings aside. It was time for me to live for myself, to stop carrying their burdens. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done testing me yet. One evening, as I was preparing dinner for Emily and myself, my phone rang. I saw the caller ID, my mother. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something inside me told me I should pick up. Hello. I answered, my voice steady. Hi, sweetheart, my mother said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it in weeks. I've been thinking about what you said, and I want to talk. I felt my heart race. Part of me wanted to snap at her, to demand why it had taken so long for her to come around, but I held back. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, I'm listening. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then she spoke again. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. For everything. For how I treated you. For how we both treated you. I've realized how much you've done for us, and how selfish we were. My mother's apology hung in the air, and for a moment, I was unsure how to respond. I hadn't expected it to come so suddenly, so sincerely. I could feel the sincerity in her voice, but the wounds ran deep. It's not just about what you said, I replied quietly. It's about the years of taking and never giving. The years of making me feel invisible. You didn't just call Emily a burden. You called me one too. My words felt heavier now, like they were. Finally reaching her. I know, she said softly. And I regret it. I wish I could take it all back. I've been selfish, and I see that now. I want to make it right, if you'll let me. My mind raced as I listened to her. I wasn't sure if I could ever fully forgive her, but part of me wondered if there was a way to move forward. I didn't want to carry the weight of this anger anymore. It had been eating away at me for too long. We'll see. I said finally, my voice firm but not harsh. I'm not promising anything, but I'll consider it. But it's going to take time. A lot of time. There was silence on the other end of the line before she spoke again. I understand, she whispered. Thank you for listening. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of relief. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had finally started to take my own life back. I spent the next few weeks trying to find a balance between moving forward and holding on to the past. The air felt different now that I had spoken my truth, but there was still a lingering weight in my chest. I had told my mother what I needed to, but things were far from resolved. I focused on Emily, my sweet daughter, and tried to keep the peace in my own home. But deep down, I knew that I wasn't the same person anymore. The call from my mother, though a step in the right direction, hadn't erased the hurt. I still felt the sting of their words, still felt the years of being taken for granted. I couldn't let go of the anger, not completely. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang again. It was my father. My heart skipped a beat. I had not heard from him since that night, and the silence had been deafening. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what he wanted to say. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Hi, it's Dad, he said, his voice quieter than usual. I've been thinking about everything, and I want to talk. Can we meet? I felt a mix of emotions. I didn't know if I was ready to have another conversation, but I knew it was something that had to happen eventually. All right, I said, not sure how this would go. When we agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop near my house. The moment I walked into the cafe, I saw him sitting at a table near the window. He looked smaller somehow, older than I remembered. I had spent so many years seeing him as the strong one, the one who always had an answer, the one who fixed everything. But now, he seemed vulnerable, as though the weight of everything that had happened was finally catching up with him. I sat down across from him, unsure of what to say. There was a long pause before he spoke. I'm sorry, he said, looking me directly in the eyes. I know I can't undo what's been said or done, but I want you to know that I'm sorry for how we treated you. You've been carrying so much, and we never even noticed. His words hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. I wanted to say something, to tell him how much the past few months had hurt, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I just nodded. I know, I said quietly. But it's not just about what happened. It's about the years of not being seen, of always putting everyone else first, and never getting anything in return. My father's face softened, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the father I had once known. The one who cared, the one who listened. I understand, he said, and I'm so sorry for that. I've been blind to a lot of things, and I know I've let you down. I sat there, processing everything he said. I didn't feel angry anymore, but I didn't feel fully ready to forgive him either. The pain was still fresh, and it wasn't something I could just forget. It's going to take time, I said, my voice firm. But I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to forget. He nodded. I don't expect you to, but I hope, over time, we can find a way to rebuild what's been broken. I didn't know if we would ever get back to the way things were. I didn't know if I could ever look at them the same way again. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to keep carrying the weight of their mistakes. I had learned to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and that was something no one could take away. As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of relief. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. I was no longer living for them. I was living for me, and for Emily. And that, I realized, was enough. I had spent so many years trying to please them, trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect mother. But now, as I watched Emily sleep soundly in her crib, I realized that I was done seeking their approval. I wasn't the same person anymore. I had spent so long living for other people, and now, I was finally learning how to live for myself. The shift had been gradual, but it felt like the most freeing thing I had ever done. I no longer felt trapped in the expectations that others had placed on me. As time passed, I started to fill my life with things I had neglected for far too long. I reconnected with old friends, people I had distanced myself from because I was too busy caring for everyone else. I started taking walks in the park, reading books I had forgotten about, and spending time focusing on the small, simple joys of life. One afternoon, while I was out shopping for Emily's new clothes, I ran into an old friend from college, Sarah. We hadn't spoken in years, but as soon as she saw me, she smiled. Olivia, wow, it's been ages. How are you? She said, wrapping me in a warm hug. I smiled back, surprised at how much I had missed her. I'm good, I said, surprised at how easy the conversation flowed. Life's been different, but I'm managing. We spent the next few minutes catching up, and it felt so refreshing to be talking to someone who wasn't a part of the drama that had filled my life for so long. Sarah listened as I shared a bit about what had been going on with my family, and when I was done, she looked at me with genuine concern. You've been through a lot, Olivia. But you know, sometimes people don't realize what they have until it's too late. Her words hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. I had been so focused on my anger, my hurt, that I hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. My parents' actions, their words, weren't about me. They were about them. They were about their own failures and insecurities. I had spent so much time holding on to their mistakes that I had forgotten to let go. I thanked Sarah for her kind words and promised to stay in touch. As I left the store, I felt a strange sense of peace. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I had spent so much time waiting for my parents to apologize, for them to see the damage they had done. But in that moment, I realized that I didn't need them to do that anymore. I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. I was enough on my own. The next few weeks were filled with quiet, steady progress. I didn't hear from my parents again, and I didn't feel the need to reach out. I focused on Emily and on myself. I started to rebuild my life in ways I hadn't thought possible. I started planning for the future, thinking about the things I wanted to achieve, the places I wanted to go, and the people I wanted to meet. I knew that it would take time to fully heal, but I was on my way. I had found my strength again, and it was mine to keep. I woke up that morning feeling different. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't weighed down by the thoughts of my parents or the past. I didn't feel like I was carrying everyone's burdens anymore. The days had become mine again, and I was starting to reclaim parts of myself I had lost somewhere along the way. Emily was the center of my world, but now, I was finally giving myself permission to live for me too. I took her to the park that afternoon, and as we sat on the swing together, I realized how much I had changed. The old me would have been constantly checking my phone, waiting for an apology or a message from my parents, wondering if they missed me or if they had finally understood how much they had hurt me. But now, I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I was making my own peace. The sun was setting as we left the park, and the sky was painted in shades of pink and orange. I felt calm, content even. I had been taking things slow, healing one step at a time. The next few weeks brought more change, both big and small. I started meeting new people, building friendships outside of the family dynamics that had defined me for so long. I joined a book club, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the time for. It felt good to talk to people about things other than family obligations and old grievances. Emily thrived in the new routine too. We had become a little team, just the two of us. She seemed happier, more settled, and I could see the difference in her eyes. It wasn't just me finding peace, it was both of us. I knew I was growing, evolving into someone who was no longer defined by what my parents thought of me. It was a quiet revolution, a shift in the way I saw myself. But one afternoon, my phone rang again. It was my mother. I hesitated for a moment before picking it up. There had been silence between us for so long, and I wasn't sure what to expect. "Hi, sweetie," she said, her voice tentative. "I've been thinking about you. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to reach out." I let her words settle before I spoke. "What is it, Mom?" I said, my voice calm, not angry, just steady. "I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry for that," she continued. I don't know how to make things right, but I want to try. I've been thinking about what you said, and I realize now that I've taken you for granted. I see that now." Her apology was genuine, and I could hear the regret in her voice, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. I had come so far, built my life around my own strength, and now she was asking to come back into it. I didn't know if I was ready. "It's going to take time," I replied. "A lot of time. But I'm not closing the door completely. I just need space to figure out what I want from this relationship." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'm here when you're ready." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of clarity. I wasn't ready to forgive yet, but I wasn't holding on to the anger anymore. It was like a weight had been lifted from me once again. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore, but I also wasn't carrying their mistakes around with me anymore. I had let go of the past, and now, I was moving forward, step by step. I knew that no matter what happened with my parents, I had found peace on my own, and that was something no one could take away from me. I woke up that morning with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The weight of the past few months, the uncertainty, the silence, everything had settled into something manageable. I had finally taken control of my life. I spent the morning with Emily, watching her play with her toys, laughing as she clumsily built towers with blocks. I found myself smiling more, living in the moment, not looking back. The decision to take things slow with my parents was starting to feel right. I wasn't pushing for anything. I wasn't rushing for reconciliation. I had made my peace with what had happened, and I was living in the present. But that afternoon, as I was preparing dinner, the phone rang again. It was my father this time. I hesitated before answering. I wasn't sure what he wanted. After everything that had happened, I wasn't expecting him to reach out, but part of me had been waiting for this. "Hi, Olivia," he said, his voice softer than I had heard it in months. "I've been thinking about everything, and I just wanted to check in. How are you?" I let out a slow breath before responding. "I'm doing well, Dad. Really, Emily and I are fine. How about you?" There was a pause on the other end. "I've been better," he admitted. "I know I can't undo what's been done, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I want to do better. For you. For Emily." I listened, taking in his words. I didn't know if I could fully believe him yet, but I was willing to listen. The past had been full of disappointments, but maybe this was the first step toward something different. "I don't expect everything to change overnight," I said, my voice steady. "But I do appreciate that you're trying." He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry years of regret. "I understand, and I'll give you the space you need. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." I didn't know if I could ever return to the way things were, but for the first time in a long while, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't desperate for their approval. I had built a life for myself and Emily, one that didn't rely on anyone but us. And that was enough. As the call ended, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I didn't need to have all the answers, and I didn't need my parents to fix everything. What I had now, what we had, was real. I turned off the phone and returned to the kitchen, where Emily was waiting for me, her small hands gripping a spoon. The world felt different, lighter somehow. And I knew, deep down, that no matter what came next, I had the strength to handle it. I had built my life on my own terms, and nothing could take that away. I spent the next few weeks quietly reflecting on everything that had happened. I didn't reach out to my parents, and they didn't reach out to me either. But I wasn't holding on to the bitterness anymore. I had made peace with what we had, or rather, with what we didn't have. Emily and I settled into our new routine. Life was simple but fulfilling. I realized how much I had let the noise of family drama drown out the quiet joy of just being present in the moment. One evening, as I was tucking Emily into bed, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. I wasn't afraid of what my parents thought of me, or if they would ever come around to truly understanding the weight of their actions. I had my own strength now, and that was enough. I had learned to stand up for myself, to not settle for being treated as less than. My heart felt lighter as I kissed Emily goodnight, watching her drift off to sleep. The next morning, I received an unexpected call. It was my mother again. This time, I didn't hesitate to pick up the phone. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice sounding different this time, gentler, more vulnerable. "I know it's been a while, but I just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" I wasn't sure how to respond at first. It wasn't the first time she had reached out, but this time, there was something different in her voice. It wasn't the tone of someone trying to fix things right away. It was someone who had truly taken the time to reflect. "I'm doing well," I said. "Really, Emily and I are good. We're finding our way, one day at a time." There was a long pause on the other end, and then she spoke again. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize now that I've failed you. I haven't been the mother you needed, and for that, I'm truly sorry. I can't undo the past, but I want to make things right if you'll allow me." I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of emotions. Her words were hard to hear, but they were what I had been waiting for. I had spent so much time angry, so much time holding on to the past. But now, I wasn't sure what forgiveness looked like. "It's not about undoing the past, Mom," I said quietly. "It's about moving forward. It's about showing up, even when it's hard." "I know," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "And I will. I'm here for you, and I will prove it." I didn't know if I could ever fully trust her again, but I appreciated that she was finally taking responsibility for her actions. I didn't feel the need to forgive her in that moment, but I also didn't feel the anger I once had. I felt calm. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own story. As the conversation ended, I realized something important. I had already forgiven myself. I didn't need to carry the weight of their mistakes anymore. I was free, and that was enough. I hung up the phone and walked into the living room, where Emily was playing with her toys. I smiled at her, feeling a warmth in my chest. She was my priority now. She was my family, and we were enough. I had spent so much time worrying about what my parents thought, wondering if they would ever understand. But as I sat in my living room, watching Emily play, I realized that I had finally let go of their expectations. I didn't need their approval anymore. I was enough on my own. I was creating a life for myself, one where I was in control, one where my happiness didn't depend on anyone else's opinion. That evening, after putting Emily to bed, I sat down with a cup of tea and thought about everything that had happened. The phone call from my father, my mother's apology, it had all been a turning point. I didn't feel the same anger anymore, but I also didn't feel the need to rush back into any sort of relationship with them. I was content. But then, a few days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my parents. I hadn't expected to hear from them again so soon, especially not in such a formal way. I opened it carefully, wondering what they had to say. The letter was brief, but heartfelt. They apologized again for the hurt they had caused and expressed their desire to make things right. They didn't ask for my forgiveness, but they asked for a chance to show me that they had changed. As I read the words, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to open the door to them again, to let them back into my life. But another part of me was unsure. I had come so far on my own, and I didn't want to risk going back to the way things were. But something in the letter spoke to me. It wasn't just an apology, it was an acknowledgement of their mistakes, and that meant more than I had expected. I sat with the letter for a while, contemplating what to do. I didn't have to decide right away, and for once, I felt no pressure. I realized that whatever choice I made, it would be the right one for me. I didn't have to rush. I could take my time, just like I had with everything else in my life. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval, but I wasn't closing doors either. It was about setting boundaries and moving at my own pace. That evening, after thinking it over, I decided to call my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said when she answered the phone. "I got your letter." There was a pause, and I could hear the anticipation in her voice. "I'm not sure where this will lead, but I'm willing to give it a chance. Let's take things slow, one step at a time." I could almost hear the relief in her sigh. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said. "That's all I wanted. I know I can't change the past, but I hope we can start fresh." I hung up the phone feeling calm, not relieved, but calm. I wasn't sure where this new chapter would take me, but I knew I was ready for whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the future. I wasn't afraid to make mistakes or face challenges. I had learned to trust myself, and that was all I needed. With Emily by my side, I knew that I could handle whatever came my way. I spent the next few weeks adjusting to the subtle shift in my relationship with my parents. It was a slow process, like learning to walk again after years of being confined to a small space. I didn't expect everything to change overnight, but I was learning to navigate this new dynamic with caution and hope. Emily seemed to sense the change too. There was a new lightness in the house, a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. I watched her grow, her laughter filling the rooms, her curiosity and energy reminding me of what truly mattered. Life had settled into a rhythm that felt right, one where I was no longer defined by the past, but by the choices I made today. One Saturday afternoon, while I was folding laundry, the phone rang. It was my father. I hadn't heard from him since that last phone call, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to have another conversation. But something told me that this time, it would be different. "Hi, Olivia," he said, his voice tentative. "I've been thinking, and I want to know if you and Emily would like to join us for dinner. Just the four of us. No pressure, just a chance to catch up." My heart skipped a beat. A part of me wanted to say no, to keep the distance I had built. But another part of me realized that I couldn't live in the past forever. I had set boundaries, but I also didn't want to shut them out completely. "Okay," I said, my voice steady but unsure. "We can come, but I'm not making any promises. I'm still figuring things out." "That's all I'm asking," he replied, relief clear in his voice. "Thank you." The night of the dinner, I was nervous. I had spent so many years carrying resentment, and now, I wasn't sure what to expect. Emily and I arrived at their house, and there was a strange sense of familiarity in the air. The same old furniture, the same pictures on the wall, but everything felt different now. We sat down to eat, and the conversation started off slow. Small talk at first, nothing too personal. But as the evening went on, I found myself letting my guard down. My parents didn't try to make up for the past with grand gestures. They didn't try to fix everything in one night. Instead, they listened, really listened. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was sitting at the table not as a daughter who was carrying everyone's burdens, but as an equal. As the night came to a close, my father looked at me with a sincerity I hadn't seen in years. "Thank you for giving us this chance," he said quietly. "I know it's not easy, and I know we've let you down. But we're here now, and we'll keep showing up." I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if things would ever be the way they once were, but I knew I had started something new. A new chapter where I wasn't carrying the weight of their mistakes anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to change, but I was open to the possibility. And that was enough for me. Emily and I left their house that night, and as we walked to the car, I felt a quiet sense of relief. I wasn't sure what forgiveness looked like, but I had found a way to let go of the anger that had held me back for so long. I was living my life now, not defined by anyone else's expectations, but by my own. And that felt like the greatest freedom I could ever find. I continued living in the new space I had created for myself and Emily. Each day felt like a fresh start, and it was amazing how much lighter my life felt. I no longer spent my time waiting for an apology, for validation, or for anyone else to fix things. I had learned to rely on myself, and in doing so, I had found a strength I didn't know I had. The small moments in life that I once took for granted now held a greater meaning. Emily and I spent more time outdoors, walking through the park, laughing as she played in the sandbox. I was present in ways I had never been before. I had always been so focused on what I had to do for others, but now, I was learning to just be. One morning, I decided to take Emily on a small road trip. We didn't have a destination, just a journey to enjoy together. As we drove through the open road, I could feel the freedom in the air. The world outside the car seemed to stretch endlessly, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of possibility. I had created this life for us, and it was mine to shape however I wanted. It wasn't just about me and Emily anymore. It was about our future. A few weeks later, I received a text from my mother. She had asked if I would be open to having lunch together. I felt a wave of hesitation wash over me. It wasn't about the apology or whether we could pick up where we left off. It was about where I was now, where we were now. I had grown in ways I hadn't expected, and I didn't want to slip back into old patterns. But I also didn't want to close the door completely. I replied with a simple, "Sure, we can meet." We decided on a quiet cafe downtown. When I walked in, my mother was already seated, her hands nervously fidgeting with the napkin on the table. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. I sat down across from her, unsure of what this meeting would hold. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, her voice almost hesitant. "I know we've had our differences, and I know that I can't undo the past. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I've been working on myself, Olivia. I don't want to lose you again." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long time. Her words were sincere, but it wasn't just about what she said. It was about what had changed, what had shifted in both of us. "I've changed too," I said quietly. "I've learned to take care of myself, to not wait for others to fix things for me. I can't just go back to the way things were, but I'm open to moving forward." Slowly, she nodded, understanding. We spent the next hour talking about life, about where we had been, and where we were going. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. It was a step in the right direction. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was being pulled in two directions. I wasn't trying to fix everything or carry everyone's burdens. I was just living, and that was enough. I spent the following months learning how to balance the past with the present, not for anyone else, but for myself. It wasn't easy. Sometimes, the weight of everything would sneak up on me, reminding me of the years I had spent trying to meet expectations and carry burdens that were never mine to carry. But every day was a step forward, a small victory. Emily and I continued to thrive in our little world. We made our own traditions, like the weekend trips to the farmer's market and cooking together in the kitchen. I would teach her how to make simple dishes, her small hands stirring with concentration as she tried to mimic my movements. These moments, these quiet, everyday acts, felt like the most important part of my life. There was something peaceful about it. One evening, as we were eating dinner, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from my mother. It had been a while since our last conversation, but this time, I didn't hesitate to open it. The message was short, but it was enough. "I've been thinking about you and Emily. Would you like to come over for dinner sometime soon? No pressure. Just family." I stared at the screen for a while, the words sinking in. It wasn't an apology or a plea. It was an invitation, an attempt at rebuilding, at starting something new. I had thought about this moment, wondered when the right time would come, and now here it was. It felt like I had reached a place of peace where I wasn't bound by resentment, but I still wasn't sure what it would mean to reconnect. Emily was my first priority, and I needed to protect the space we had built. But something inside me told me that this wasn't a step back. This was just another part of the journey. I called my mother back later that evening. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think we can come. We're free this weekend." I could hear the relief in her voice, but she didn't push for anything more. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I just want to have dinner with you and Emily. No expectations, just us." We made plans for that Saturday. As the week passed, I found myself reflecting more on everything that had happened, on how much I had grown, and on what this dinner could mean. I didn't expect it to be perfect. I didn't expect it to heal everything that had been broken. But maybe it would be a step toward understanding, a chance to rebuild slowly. That Saturday, Emily and I arrived at my parents' house. I could feel the weight of the past still lingering in the air, but it wasn't as suffocating as it had been before. My mother greeted us at the door, her smile soft and genuine. "I'm glad you came," she said, her voice full of warmth. It wasn't the grand gesture I had once hoped for, but it was real, and that was enough. The evening passed slowly. We ate, talked, and for the first time in a long time, there was no tension. There was no need to prove anything or fix what was broken. We were just present, sharing a meal. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And in that moment, I realized that this was all I needed. This quiet, slow progress toward something new. I woke up that Saturday morning with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. It was the kind of calm that comes with knowing you've done all you can and now, you just have to wait and see what happens. The plan was simple. Lunch with my parents, no expectations, just a chance to be together. I wanted to keep my mind clear, to focus on the present moment. Emily and I got ready, her little hands still trying to button her shirt all by herself. It was one of those moments where I could see how much she had grown, and how much I had grown too. I had spent so much time worrying about my parents, about their approval, about whether or not they would ever come to terms with the things that had happened. But now, with Emily by my side, I realized that I didn't need to wait for anyone's approval to live my life. I had already made my own peace. We arrived at my parents' house, and as soon as the door opened, my mother smiled. It wasn't forced, it wasn't filled with guilt. It was just genuine. "You made it," she said, stepping aside to let us in. The air felt lighter. It didn't feel like the weight of the past was hanging over us anymore. We sat down at the dining table, and I could tell my father was trying his best to make conversation, but he was also treading carefully. I wasn't sure what he was expecting from me, and maybe he wasn't sure either. We ate together, Emily laughing as she tried to reach for the mashed potatoes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of normalcy. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. We talked about small things, how Emily was doing in school, how the weather had been unusually warm for this time of year, the little things that make life go on. I could feel my parents' attention, not in the way they had once focused on their own needs, or what they thought they were owed. Now, they were just listening, really listening. It wasn't about fixing the past or pretending that everything was fine. It was about moving forward, piece by piece. As the meal came to an end, my mother looked at me, her eyes soft, almost apologetic. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know things are different now, but I hope we can keep trying, keep moving forward." I didn't know if I was ready to fully embrace what that meant, but I could tell she meant it. And that, in itself, was enough for now. I smiled, nodding. "We'll take it one step at a time." It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. We weren't back to where we had been, and maybe we never would be. But I didn't need that anymore. I had built a life for Emily and me, one that was grounded in my own strength, my own choices. The rest, I realized, was just part of the journey. The rest would fall into place in time. As we left their house that day, I didn't feel the heavy weight of expectation on my shoulders anymore. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Emily took my hand as we walked to the car, and for the first time, I felt like we were walking toward a future that belonged to us, one where we didn't need to carry anyone else's burdens. It was just us, and that was enough. I didn't expect things to be easy. After that dinner, things didn't magically get better overnight. It was a slow process, one filled with tiny steps forward and a few steps back. But that was okay. I had learned that life wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. Over the next few weeks, Emily and I continued our quiet, peaceful life. We spent more time in the garden, watching the flowers bloom, and I took up a new hobby, painting. I wasn't trying to become an artist, but I found that painting allowed me to express emotions I hadn't known how to communicate. Each brushstroke felt like a release. One afternoon, while Emily played with her dolls in the living room, I finished a painting of the sunset. The colors, the warmth, it reminded me of how far I had come. I stood back and admired it, surprised at how much it resembled the peace I had found in my life. But even in the midst of all this newfound calm, I still found myself thinking about my parents. It wasn't a constant ache anymore, but the thought of them still lingered. I wasn't angry. I didn't feel resentment anymore, but I wasn't sure how to move forward with them. The distance had become something familiar, something I was comfortable with. The day I finally decided to call them again, I wasn't sure what I would say. My mind raced with possibilities. Would they be surprised to hear from me? Would they understand that I wasn't ready to dive back into the old patterns, but that I was willing to take things slow? I dialed my mother's number and waited. It rang a few times before she picked up. "Hello." Her voice was warm, and I immediately felt a wave of comfort. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's me." There was a pause before she responded. "Olivia, how are you?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. "I'm good," I said. "Emily's good too. I've been thinking about us, about everything, and I just wanted to talk." She didn't rush to say anything. She just waited. I know things can't go back to how they were, I said, feeling the weight of the words. But I think I'm ready to move forward, even if it's slowly. She sighed, and I could hear the relief in her breath. I understand, she said softly. And I'm here, whenever you're ready. No pressure, just, I'm here. The conversation wasn't a grand reunion, but it didn't need to be. It was a small step forward, but a step nonetheless. After I hung up, I felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about finding a place for peace. I wasn't going to wait around for them to fix everything. I had learned to fix things for myself. But I wasn't closing the door. I was just opening it, slowly, cautiously, to see what would come next. I had learned to trust the journey, to trust myself, and that was enough. Emily and I were enough.